Well, the South African Post Office is planning to retrench a bulk of its workers after issuing them with Section 189 notices. The workers say they have learnt with shock about the planned move by SAPO, or the Post Office. Some 6,000 workers are affected. The retrenchments form part of the Post Office's turnaround strategy, which also includes the cutting of staff salaries by as much as 40%. Let's bring in SABC News Economics reporter Katlego Legodi, who's been closely following this story. Katlego, good morning to you. I know that the Communication Workers Union has also spoken out about this issue.
Very good morning to you, Naledi. Most definitely, the Communications Workers Union, they've been at the forefront, really, of fighting issues within the South African Post Office. Just last month, they had taken issue with a new strategy that was introduced by the CEO and the executive of SAPO to say that they're going to cut the salaries by at least 40%. This is a strategy whereby would see people coming in for 3 days instead of the 5 days. And SAPO had said at the time last month that this is a strategy that they think would help in terms of turning around the finances of the parastatal. So the unions really saying that they're looking to, as they're waiting to hear from the SONA in terms of interventions that would be followed, of course, by the budget as well, in terms of helping out the parastatal. They were shocked by this move by the SAPO to say that they are looking at retrenching around 6,000 of their workers countrywide. So SAPO has a staff complement of about 13,000 of their workers. So 6,000 of those workers are going
close to half.
Yeah, close to half. Basically, they're going to lose their jobs here. And they're saying that they're not going to take this lying, because they're saying that this comes as we are trying by all means to negotiate with the post office to say that there are processes that need to be followed. You can't just now come and issue that Section 189 notice without really following due processes. One of those processes have been around the inclusion or the roping in of the bargaining council, to say that that is where issues of workers and the employer are being discussed. But here we're seeing about the staff complement. About 6,000 of the workers at SAPO are standing to lose their jobs countrywide. And this comes as Naledi, SAPO has been closing some of their offices, in some parts of the country. And just this pointing to the demise of the entity over time. This is something that was raised also by the Communications Workers Union to say that they need now to move to the CCMA, even try to rope in the communications department to try and save SAPO. But the CEO, Nomkhita Mona, last month already telling the SABC that really the entity at this point in time is at the brink of collapse, looking at the historical debt.
I think what's quite concerning as well is that you've got that 6,000 people that are possibly going to lose their jobs as a result of the Section 189 notice that has been given out. But at the same time, that 40% salary cut also quite substantial.
Most definitely. They had taken issue with this to say that let's try to find other strategies that could help the workers. But at this point in time, it seems as if the workers were presented with an option to say it's either you take the 40% salary cut, or you basically take a hike here, looking at the fact that most people cannot afford to take a hike because of the fact that the economy has not been doing well for quite some time. You can't afford to lose your job. So they were saying that looking at that strategy, they're looking at these people coming in on a rotational basis, whereby they would come in 3 days instead of 5 days. But that seems to not even be kicking in. It was supposed to kick in now in February, but it looks like SAPO has moved ahead to retrench some of these employees.
Yeah, what happens now?
What happens now is that they're looking at roping in the CCMA, the Communications Workers Unions. They're looking at also just involving the Ministry of Communications to try and help here. They're looking at the budget that is coming by the Finance Minister to say that can that at least help in trying to create some emergency fund that would help SAPO, so that instead of losing the staff complement, losing the infrastructure over time with the offices being closed, how can we best salvage the situation that we have right now? But most of them not happy around the turnaround strategy that has been implemented. But SAPO coming through to say that it's very critical that they introduce some of these moves at the entity.
Before I let you go, and I think it certainly is important to talk about what's happening with regards to jobs within the post office, but I think there's something to be said about the role that the South African Post Office still very much plays in the country and in moving goods and services. I mean, is the South African Post Office still very much relevant, really?
At this point in time, there's $1 million question. The unions are saying that it's still very much relevant. Hence, they're saying that they're accusing the new management of trying to push for the privatization of SAPO, saying most of these things are to frustrate the workers, to frustrate the entity, so that at some point then would see it being sold to the highest bidder. But it remains a lucrative entity, even though over time we saw, some private courier companies coming through to
entering the market,
into the market. But they're saying that there is actually a need really to safeguard the heart of SAPO, because it's at this point in time, it's as if the private sector is trying by all means to get its hands one way or another into the entity, and the unions and the workers saying that that would be a decimal for the entity, and they're trying by all means to try to avoid that. But they're saying it remains relevant. So really, at this point in time, we know very well that they were helping out even with this digital migration process that was introduced by the Department of Communication in terms of migration. But it remains to be seen how that process also will be affected with this stuff that's then to be shoved.
Yeah. Katlego Legodi, our economics reporter there. Thank you so much for bringing us that story. Always a pleasure.